morning. It is Monday, May 18th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, with the new Israeli right-wing government sworn in, hope fades for the possibility of a renewed peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. Iraqi forces pull out of Ramadi as ISIS takes over that main city in Iraq. And later on the show, Barcelona wins La Liga. Lionel Messi's goal sees Barca clinch the title at the home of reigning champions Atletico Madrid. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin in Israel, where 2 days after the narrow right-wing coalition headed by Benjamin Netanyahu has been sworn in, hopes for the elusive, ever-elusive peace process seem to be non-existent, if elusive at best. None of the 5 parties in Netanyahu's new government, Shas, United Torah, Judaism, Kulanu, Likud, and the Jewish Home, has a platform which comes close to the basic Palestinian demand of an Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 lines with minor land swaps of equitable value. The peace process itself, or lack thereof, has been frozen since the U.S.-led negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians broke down in April 2014. The new Israeli coalition also appears to leave the international community with little hope that talks will resume in the near future. International leaders have already expressed doubts and skepticism at the makeup of the agenda of the new government in Israel. Even U.S. President Barack Obama sounded pessimistic in a recent interview given to Al Arabiya, in which he stated chances for reviving the process in light of the political considerations of both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas are slim. So is the recent makeup of the Israeli government the last nail in the coffin of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? To try and figure that one out, we are joined in studio by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Good morning to you, Tal. Before we break it down, let's take a look at your report about the latest.
The new Israeli government is only taking its first steps, but the international community is already skeptical.
The only solution to me over the long term is a two-state solution. And we worked very hard, but frankly, the politics inside of Israel and the politics among the Palestinians as well made it very difficult for each side to trust each other enough to make that leap.
Obama is realistic. The narrow right-wing government sworn in last week does not suggest promising prospects for the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Since Netanyahu's re-election, the White House has been reiterating its demand that Israel demonstrate a genuine commitment to the two-state solution. However, despite repeated warnings of a reassessment of the relations, Obama has not yet decided on a new policy and is still pushing Paris to postpone a planned Security Council resolution on the issue. Instead, he prefers to focus on the other front, concluding the Iran nuclear deal by the end of June.
We will safeguard security. We will work toward peace.
While the U.S. seems to be taking its time, Europe has less patience for Netanyahu's slogans. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini is set to arrive this week in the region, against the backdrop of growing European pressure to move ahead with punitive measures against Israel. Mogherini, who has signaled she wishes to play a larger role in the regional conflict, will meet with the Israeli and Palestinian leadership and try to see if there is any way out of this impasse. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is continuing his efforts to internationalize the conflict, as he met with the Pope at the Vatican this weekend. The U.S. and Europe can make whatever demands they want. Abbas is not waiting for Netanyahu any longer.
Let's go first straight to Washington, D.C., where Times of Israel correspondent Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle is joining us live. Rebecca, President Obama to Al Arabiya says that, he basically I don't want to say it in words that he let go of the two-state solutions, but that it's not going to happen in the next year, which is also his last year of the presidency. So he's given up in not so many words.
Well, I think that he's expressing frustration even more than he's given up. I think that he realizes that this is not going to happen the way that he would prefer, which is to get both parties back to a negotiating table with the U.S. kind of as the mediator or the interlocutor. And I think that's becoming increasingly clear that that's not going to happen anytime soon, or at least not without putting substantial pressure on both parties, something that he doesn't necessarily have the political backing at this point to do. I think what he's beginning to look at is a choice that he does not want to make with elections coming up, which is the choice between inaction on one hand and internationalization on the other hand, in which the U.S. is basically forced to put its money where its mouth is in terms of the numerous threats it's made regarding votes or vetoes or abstentions at the UN Security Council, which is something that most people say is not something that a Democratic president wants to do minutes before the 2016 elections.
So, in other words, does that mean, or are we looking at the point where, as you just said, that the United States is most likely not going to veto any unilateral moves from the Palestinians anytime soon?
Well, I think that the dice still haven't been cast entirely. I think that certainly here there's a lot of wait-and-see approach to see how things kind of shake down at the end of June with the Iran deal, as Tal mentioned in her report. And I think that the real decision about what's going to happen at the UN and with the Palestinian internationalization will come sometime after June 30th. And then we'll begin to see really which tack the administration will choose to take ultimately.
Indeed. Rebecca, thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. this morning. Tal Shalev in studio with me. What type of concessions can Netanyahu make, or does he even want to make? Or is Netanyahu now enjoying a status quo that can carry him through?
Well, I think on the contrary, we won't see any concessions coming up, but actually, when you look at the government, we are probably expected to see in the upcoming weeks some kind of actually escalation from the international community's point of view. Probably sooner or later, Netanyahu will have to agree to some kind of renewed settlement activity because of the Jewish home demands. And at some point, he will have to advance some of the right-wing legislation, which is also worrying the international community, that has to do with the Supreme Court. At some point, this government in the upcoming weeks will have to make a move that shows it is a narrow right-wing government. That's the reason he formed such a government. The question is, the big question, I think, is about who Netanyahu has clarified again and again that he wants to broaden this coalition, okay? He knows this is not a coalition he can work with, and he has been appealing to Herzog, to Avigdor Lieberman, not publicly, but probably behind the scenes, even thinking about Yair Lapid, to broaden the coalition. And he's keeping the foreign ministry open, the foreign ministry portfolio vacant for this point exactly. And it's interesting, Netanyahu traditionally had a fig leaf for the international community, some moderate faction in his government that would be, the moderate face to present to the international community. This time he doesn't have one, but in many ways the foreign ministry is a virtual fig leaf because he keeps it vacant. He says this is intended for Isaac Herzog from the Zionist Union, or maybe even Yair Lapid from Yesh Atid. And this way he says to the international community, well, listen, I'm keeping the post vacant. I want to broaden the coalition. And the meaning of broadening the coalition or expanding the coalition means immediately probably that if Herzog joins, it means Naftali Bennett is out, and that can basically change the whole story altogether. But we're still far away from that, and judging from Isaac Herzog's speech just last Thursday in the ceremony when the government was swearing in, Herzog is not running into this government. He's not rushing into this government, so Netanyahu might be in a problem. But on the other hand, we see Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on Thursday evening, Friday, on the Nakba Day speech, Thursday evening and Friday. He presents new preconditions for resuming negotiations, actually not very far-reaching, ones that that Netanyahu can find himself agreeing to in some way, way or another. Settlement construction-free is something that Netanyahu can agree to, probably silently or unofficially, not in this government, but in different kind of, if he has different partners, he can. Be an immediate release of the pre-Oslo prisoners that were supposed to be released in the
last phase of the last negotiation.
And 3, that talks will be held for a minimum of a year with a timetable for withdrawal by 2017. He does not mention 1967 borderlines. He does not even mention that. So these are actually quite far-reaching preconditions.
He's trying to open the door.
Abbas has his own problems, Abbas is presenting preconditions and at the same time continuing to rush for internationalization of the conflict. It's not only the Vatican. We have the soccer FIFA Federation coming up, which is something that that the Palestinians are pushing to ban Israel. We have the ICC that is still on the table. And we have the UN Security Council resolution, which at the moment has been postponed to July, but it will be back on the table sooner or later.
But it's suffice it to say that the two sides, both Israel and Palestine, need some form of pressure on them, which right now has been, it has been shown by the United States to be lifted, that the United States is not going to deal with it. So the question is, who's going to be vocal about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? A high-profile group of former European political leaders and diplomats, so it seems. They have called for the urgent reassessment of the EU policy on the question of a Palestinian state and have insisted Israel must be held to account for its actions in the occupied territories. In a hard-hitting letter to EU's foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini, the group, which includes former prime ministers, foreign ministers, and ambassadors, all from Europe, also expresses serious doubts about the ability of the United States to lead substantiated negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. The group, known as the European Eminent Persons Group, argues that the re-election of Prime Minister Netanyahu at the head of a narrow right-wing coalition has made the issue even more pressing. We're joined by Jonathan Sachadati, I-24 News European correspondent in London. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Al.
Now, that damning assessment of the EU policy, which the authors of the letter to Mogherini say has hidden behind U.S. leadership in an undefined manner, the letter says basically, Europe has yet to find an effective way of holding Israel to account for the way it maintains the occupation. It is time now to demonstrate to both parties how seriously European public opinions takes contraventions of international law, the perpetration of atrocities, and the denial of established rights. That's from the letter to Mogherini by very high-profile, former foreign ministers, whatnot, in Europe. Are we foreseeing more sanctions, more pressure from the EU on Israel because the United States seems to be kind of out of the game in not so many words?
It's confusing to understand exactly what impact this might have when we consider, for example, that Europe just doesn't behave as a unified body in terms of foreign policy. It can be no different in terms of Israel in the Middle East. For example, here in Britain, we've just re-elected a conservative government, which in fact has a majority now and doesn't even rely on a coalition partner. And that party has long been what it calls a friend of Israel, a critical friend occasionally where necessary. But of all the options here, it was the most favorable towards Israel. And Prime Minister David Cameron has often made it clear that he doesn't wish to interfere too much in Israel's goings-on with the Palestinians. Instead, make it clear what they believe would be the right path for peace, which is, as you say, discussions over settlement, stopping settlement building and land swaps, and clear definition of borders. But beyond that, there is no appetite from Cameron and plenty of other leaders within Europe to actually get involved in these sorts of discussions. Then there are those who are pushing for more meaningful sanctions or the like in order to pressure Israel and the Palestinians into returning to peace talks, which might actually result in some sort of final status agreement.
But, that said, though, given the fact that that letter comes out to Mogherini, and Jonathan, do stay with us, Tal, I'm wondering with you, Jonathan making a very valid point, Europe is not unified enough, as we've seen, in order to pressure Israel as a whole. But is there some danger in, those threats of sanctions on Israel from Europe that, matter to the Israeli government at all?
Well, I think the whole picture, the whole overall picture matters for Israel. Israel does not want to be isolated in the international community, even if these, all of these initiatives at the end of the day do not become practical initiatives. Just the picture, just the propaganda, and just the discourse that is created over Israel is not a positive discourse. Right. But this is a discourse that has been going long for a while already. The question is more on bilateral relations. I think at the end of the day, there are some substantial partners in Europe that Israel is on a clash with them. Cameron is on our good side in many ways, doesn't want to interfere, but we see growing impatience both from France and from Germany. Countries that are supposed to be Israel's strongest allies in Europe, and that can eventually create a lot of pressure on Israel. There just was 2 weeks ago, there was a very, very high-profile clash between Israeli diplomats and French diplomats following the French unsatisfaction with what is going on here. And Netanyahu is not really signaling a very conciliatory message to the international community. Yesterday, he gives a speech on Jerusalem Day. He says that Jerusalem was always the capital of the Jewish people alone and not of any other nation. He appoints Tzipi Chotobeli, a proponent of the one-state solution, a proponent of annexation of the West Bank. She's his appointee to the deputy foreign minister. She's the person who is going to meet many of the foreign dignitaries that are going to arrive in Israel. And this is at a time when our President Reuven Rivlin, which had a very apparently, or at least visibly successful visit to Germany last week, but also apparently had very bad discussions behind closed doors with some of the officials officials. He too is not a proponent of the two-state solution. There is a clash. The clash is it's coming. It's just a matter of when. And regarding the U.S., the fact that the U.S. is backing off, or we see some kind of President Obama kind of ignoring the process, just gives a green light for Europe to continue the pressure. And that is one of the things we're going to see in the visit this week of Mogherini to the region.
No, most likely. And Jonathan's still with us. It was, though, the week of the weekend of Mahmoud Abbas, because as the Israeli government was being sworn in, the Palestinian president was in Italy, was in the Vatican, was being welcomed, hugged, and cherished by the Pope. I know it's all not just pomp and circumstance, but it's all a very ceremonial point. But there is more of a leaning in Europe towards the Palestinian agenda, towards the Palestinian cause, wouldn't you say?
Certainly, that is what would appear to be the case on the outside, and I think that's very important from what Tal said there. The issue is not necessarily even the concrete actions that the European Union might take, but the general story that's put on top of everything. And we hear more and more of these critical voices. Indeed, we did hear this week about that visit by Mahmoud Abbas to the Vatican to see the Pope. It was a 20-minute audience he had with him, and it was reported quite widely that the Pope had called Mahmoud Abbas an angel of peace, when in actual fact, it's a good example of how things can be misreported in order to show a different actual situation, a different situation from the actual situation. The Pope, in most Italian news sources, is quoted quite clearly as saying, "Lei possa essere un angelo della pace." You might be, you could be an angel of peace. And this is reference to a medal that he was giving to Mahmoud Abbas, showing the angel of peace, who he said killed the spirit of evil and war. So this sort of thing shows that he's urging Abbas to become an angel of peace. And of course, remember that Abbas himself is the man who ordered that Munich massacre of the Israeli Olympic athletes. So when we think about the significance, the symbolism of calling someone like that an angel of peace or urging them to become one, we see what lies at the heart of this problem of trying to establish what the European Union and European countries and even the Vatican actually think. There's a clear gap between the talk of sanctions and the like and the close involvement that many European countries have with Europe, especially in often unspoken about areas like intelligence gathering, dealing with terrorist threats. And in all of these areas and bilateral trade, there is quite a lot of involvement with Israel. So there's a real conflict, a tug for these European leaders to know exactly what they should be doing in order to reconcile these two very different positions.
Now, one can say rhetoric versus actual actions, although I think the highlight of this interview, Jonathan, is that you speak Latin. But that said, Tal, just to conclude this, and thank you, Jonathan, for being with us this morning. True, rhetoric versus actions, and you and I are just theorizing right now because sadly, Elias Ananir, not with us this morning, a Palestinian political science professor who was supposed to speak to us. I'm wondering with you, do we think that all these unilateral actions, and this is just TikTok theories behind the scenes of the Israeli government, is Netanyahu worried of a third intifada? Because at a certain point, a status quo can be maintained until the ground blows up. Or is that not even a consideration?
It's definitely a consideration. We have seen in recent months, we've seen the tensions heat up mainly in Jerusalem, but in the West Bank too. But the assumption, the general assumption in Israel, and this is still the assumption, is that Abbas doesn't really have an interest in an upheaval. He doesn't really have an interest in changing the status quo. That is why basically we will see the status quo continuing, and this is just managing the conflict eventually. That will happen. But again, we have to say, if Abbas moves dramatically forward, if there is a dramatic change, unilateral move, such as the UN Security Council, or something that Israel really opposes, then it will, as we've seen in the past, it will react with some kind of with some kind of reaction
on the ground,
stopping the tax transfers, stopping the money, and this every little move, definitely in such a delicate situation, every little move is very dangerous.
Definitely. Tal Shalev, thank you for being with us this morning as we move along. Staying in the region, possibly the biggest news over the weekend, America has claimed a significant blow against ISIS when Special Forces soldiers launched a rare strike inside eastern Syria, killing a senior commander. Elite troops based in Iraq carried out the cross-border raid, which killed the terrorist leader going by the nom de guerre Abu Sayyaf. His wife was also captured and a female slave from the Yazidi minority rescued. About a dozen ISIS fighters were killed supposedly, but no American soldiers were hurt, according to reports. And the latest operation appeared to be the first in Syria, where the aim was to kill or capture an ISIS commander. Now, all this news, of course, coming out as in Iraq, ISIS have taken over Ramadi, a main city they were in control of, or a bulk of it was under their control over the last 48 hours. Now, to further discuss this, we're joined in studio by senior intelligence analyst at the Levantine Group, Benjamin Decker. Benjamin, good morning to you. Before we break it down, let's take a look at the next report and take it from there.
Iraqi government forces continue to battle Islamic militants in the city of Ramadi, capital of the country's largest province, Anbar, where the extreme militants have tightened their grip.
We will fight ISIS in Anbar as long as it takes. We will kick them out of Anbar.
Early Sunday, multiple suicide car bomb attacks killed 10 members of Iraqi security forces in Ramadi. The Islamists reportedly now control at least 60% of the city. However, airstrikes on Islamic State targets have forced them to pull back from a key government compound where they raised their black flags on Friday. ISIS took another hit over the weekend when U.S. Special Forces killed a man identified as Abu Sayyaf, a senior Islamic State leader, during a raid into Syria. It marked the first declared Special Forces operation by U.S. forces in Syria since their failed attempt to rescue a number of American hostages held by Islamic State last summer. Meanwhile, fierce battles were reported near the ancient Palmyra citadel in Syria as concerns rise for the fate of the World Heritage Site.
Protecting of heritage, I think both agree that what is happening, the destruction of heritage, is totally unacceptable, and that we have to fight extremism.
In March, Islamic State militants destroyed the ancient remains of the 2,000-year-old city of Hatra in northern Iraq and looted and bulldozed the ancient Assyrian city of Nimrud. Gaining ground against both Iraqi and Syrian troops, Islamic State militants continue to raise fears, both of the death and displacement of civilians and the destruction of the region's historic heritage.
Benjamin Decker of the Levantine Group, before we discuss these major gets, so to speak, of the coalition forces in the U.S. raid, ISIS on the ground over the course of the last 48 hours, or the last week for ISIS in the region, what happened?
So what we've seen is really a consolidation of control over the Anbar province. While Ramadi and Fallujah were areas where there was a significant ISIS presence, and there has been for almost 4 years now, we really saw a response to the failures in Tikrit and other areas where they stormed central areas of the city, opened prisons, blew up government buildings, and are in a position to march further east towards Fallujah and on Baghdad.
No, and that's the point that I think I find so, well, not disturbing, but fascinating, that all these advances are now the bulk and the top of the news. With us also is Charlie Winter, researcher at Quilliam in London. Charlie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You and I had a chance to speak on Friday. You know, over the course of the weekend, more news coming out of another bigwig of ISIS being killed. What do we know about Abu Sayyaf?
Well, we actually know very little about Abu Sayyaf, and so little, in fact, that there's been a lot of speculation as to whether he was the principal target of this raid. Now, I think that people have been perhaps a bit quick to jump to the conclusion that he was unimportant, but there is a chance that there was another target. People are talking about Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, the spokesperson for Islamic State, being the principal target. But regardless, it seems, according to the U.S. government at least, that Abu Sayyaf was a top-level member of the group and someone who was in charge of the oil smuggling of the group. So clearly we know that the United States is preoccupied with trying to diminish Islamic State's financial resources. I mean, these have been the mainstay of the group, the thing that's enabled it to control so much territory and also have such a powerful, well-oiled military machine. So taking out someone like that, if it does have a tangible effect upon the finances of the organization, then we could see a certain amount of change. But one more thing, just very quickly, is the fact that it won't have just been a raid to kill him. I mean, they'll have, of course they wanted to take him captive for future interrogations, but that didn't happen. But besides that, they'll have taken a huge amount of documentation and computers, which will have details of the organization that weren't prior known.
And that
so there will be...
Yeah, I mean, that must be, maybe that was the main agenda, but this specific raid in Syria is twofold when it comes to being interesting. One, the Americans, and Ben, this is to you, Charlie, you're staying with us, the Americans seem to be carrying out, on-the-ground operations in Syria, which as modus operandi is something different. It's also described as a very sexy operation. I hate not making fun of it, but a sex slave has been released, the wife of him was being captured, etc., etc. Does this really mean some form of a change in the American, modus operandi of fighting ISIS?
Look, the last known U.S. ground operation in Syria was the failed attempt to rescue James Foley and other Western hostages. And Charlie makes a good point that Abu Sayyaf may not have actually been the intended target. However, as he had mentioned, the human intelligence that was picked up is significant. And at the same time, the precision and accuracy of the raid and the fact that no soldiers were injured or killed demonstrates that their capacity to do this on the ground is very real. And we are only a couple of major developments away from more consistent boots on the ground, for better or worse.
You really think that this is a spelling of, we will go in, we the Americans, or we the Corps, we will go in with boots on the ground if necessary?
I think in a very limited and isolated capacity. However, this is the second operation, and we can't really rule anything out moving forward.
Right. And Charlie, just judging from because you've been researching all of the information coming out of ISIS, when something like this happens, that said, before you came on, we discussed the fact that ISIS had a spectacular week, actually, in Iraq itself. Does this mean, this propaganda, so to speak, if it were propaganda of killing the heads of ISIS, does this seem to have an effect on the group itself?
Well, it was actually very interesting monitoring the reaction, because a lot of people were very rattled by it. It certainly ruffled some feathers. There were also a lot of people who, it was a revealing chance to see just how much your average kind of online supporter for Islamic State knows about the group itself, because many people were saying, who is Abu Sayyaf? Why is he important? And it was very interesting to see that. But also, there was a whole lot of conspiracy theory. So a lot of people were saying, until there's an official statement from Islamic State, this isn't necessarily true. So we need to wait for that. At the moment, it could just be a story made up by the Americans to buoy up morale. But one thing that it did do was rattle a few cages. There were people who were really asking questions about how this intel got out, and this always follows after a leader in a jihadist group is assassinated. We've seen it a lot with the recent decapitation of the AQAP leadership through drone strikes. This kind of thing does worry jihadists. But if there's a repeat in coming weeks, then perhaps it'll worry them even more. We just got to see how that pans out.
We'll see how that pans out. Charlie Winter from London, thank you. Benjamin Decker, real quick, when it comes to fighting ISIS, as you said, in Ramadi for 4 years, it will have to be boots on the ground and not the Iraqi army.
It's actually going to be the Shiite militias over the coming hours. So we'll get back to this combination of coalition airstrikes and Iranian-backed forces on the ground.
And which brings us back to the full point of why maybe Iran is needed in the region right now. Benjamin Decker, thank you. When we get back, former Egyptian President Morsi sentenced to death in a Cairo court. How will the Muslim Brotherhood react? Do stay with us. First, the news. It is May
18th, I think. I hope so.
You have to be, you have to be the side that is really convinced.
I'm sorry, I'm failing that.
Knows what they're saying.
I'm just failing.
And I'm going, it's May, as if I don't know. It is May 18th, 2015. It's the place to be because we are joined daily to discuss the news you've missed while scanning the headlines by Ami Kaufman, the man and the bow tie.
That's right.
We got to find more colors, honey.
It's coming. Don't worry.
Coming.
The package is on its way.
Package on its way. Okay, what is the news?
Okay, we're going to start in Texas with a fight between biker gangs. 9 people are dead in Waco, Texas.
Oh, sorry, I'm not smart.
Yeah, 9 people are dead. At least 9 people are dead. 18 wounded in a fight that started in a cafe called Twin Peaks in Waco, Texas.
Get out.
Yes.
No, get out.
There were about 3 or 4 bike gangs that came to this restaurant, and things just erupted.
See, we think we have trouble here in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And then you look at that.
That looks pretty bad. It's also the worst case of violence since the Branch Davidian compound was burned in Waco, Texas, 1993. That left 86 people dead. That was a much larger.
That's much larger. But wait. It was like biker gangs just going at it?
Just going at it, yeah. Apparently the cops told the Twin Peaks cafe that they knew things were going to happen, but the Twin Peaks manager did nothing to cooperate with the local police, and he held the event at his place anyway, and this is what happened.
No, but and the name of the place called Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it even gets, how weird can it get?
Yeah. Okay, it's like Lynch was, doing tryouts for his new movie. And
on to Kabul, the Taliban. There was a suicide attack that killed 3 near the international airport in Kabul. One of them was a Britain security contractor, and 2 Afghan teenage girls that were killed in this suicide bomb attack. The Taliban took responsibility for it. This is happening. This is the second major attack in Kabul in a week. On Thursday, there were 14 people killed in a hotel, mostly foreigners, an attack there. And this is also about 2 weeks after some peace talks began between the Taliban and local government officials, and it doesn't look like it's going to be.
And not only, it's sad to mention, but if we're connecting the dots and looking at Afghanistan and looking at Iraq, all these places where the United States came in with operations enduring freedom and protect democracy and whatnot.
Right.
And we're seeing
this is what happened.
Yeah, we're seeing the breakdown in suicide. Well, it's not stopping. Yes.
The migrant crisis in Southeast Asia that we've been talking about, the Rohingya Muslims that are stuck on boats in the middle of the Bay of Bengal. 700 people were rescued off of the Indonesian coast, most of them suffering from malnourishment. In fact, that the BBC has reported that 100 people died after a fight over food, basically broke out on the ship, on one of the ships. Some people were apparently stabbed, hanged, or thrown overboard. There's still thousands of people on these boats in the middle of the water, and nobody's willing to take them. And there are apparently boats that are mooring off of the coast of Myanmar still, who are not coming to Thailand because they know that they're going to have trouble when they reach Thailand. But the people are still on the boats; they're not being left off. They want ransom for these people. The smugglers want ransom.
As they're killing each other over food.
Yes, as they're killing over food. So this is just horrific.
No, yeah, and not ending.
Not ending. Yesterday in Jerusalem, basically Israel, all over Israel, marked the Jerusalem Day, marking Israel's conquest of the city in 1967. And as usual, about 16,000 people, mostly right-wing extremists, walked through the old city, the Muslim quarter, chanting racist slants against Arabs. A few people were injured. We can see from these pictures. These are the people. They're standing in front of Damascus Gate, which is, the main entrance to the Muslim quarter. And they attacked Palestinians, also Palestinian photojournalists that were hit there.
And to remind people, this is the Jerusalem Day, which was marked about 2 days after the Palestinian Nakba Day which was marked on Friday.
Yeah.
But just goes to show the divide between the two peoples, and it all eventually boils down to city stones and rocks.
Right.
Yes.
The face of the settlement movement, Rabbi Moshe Levinger, who's the ideological force behind the Jewish settlement in Hebron, died over the weekend. He was, I think his age was 80. He was 80. He founded the Kiryat Arba settlement.
Kiryat Arba, to remind people, that's the Hebron settlement.
Yeah, just outside of Hebron, and also, was one of the first to go into Hebron itself. Really considered the face of the settlement movement. He's a right-wing extremist, basically. Both Netanyahu and Herzog, the head of the opposition, sent their condolences to the family. He also sat in jail for a few months for killing a young Palestinian when his car was stoned in 1988.
Wow.
He took his pistol out and shot and killed one Palestinian. He sat about 3 months in jail for that.
We're going to let that stand. Yes.
Yeah. And staying in Israel, Louis C.K. hosted...
Can I smile now?
Yes, you can now.
Okay.
Well, just for a while. He hosted the Saturday Night Live on NBC, and he had a pretty controversial monologue pretty much dealing with pedophilia, but he also had a segment about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and let's see what he said.
Yes, let's see.
It is because my kids are like Israel and Palestine, and I'm like America. The little ones like Palestine because she always gets screwed. She gets the worst deals. She's like, she threw a rock at my face. I'm like, you're fine. Look, you have a great life. You get to take a rock to the face once in a while. You're fine. The older one is like Israel. She comes.
No, I love it. I'm sorry that, we're going to speak a little bit about me, but every time I see Louis, for a change, every time I see Louis C.K., the best comedian on Parenthood, seriously, the best comedian, because he has this whole bit about, he finds a kid in the preschool that is is giving his girl a hard time.
Yeah.
And he finds the thing inside of him, and that happens to me too, that you want to kill that child.
Yeah, I've been there.
You've been there. It's
totally.
like, I'm going to kill this kid. Do not pull my child's hair.
Yeah.
But they're 4, or they're 2 years old. Okay, yes.
Yes.
Moving on.
Moving on, keeping it light, Scott Walker, a potential Republican presidential candidate, visited Israel recently, and when he went back to the States,
that is what Republican candidates
that's what they do, and he's apparently apparently, going after the Jewish vote and the evangelical vote. And he said in a trip to Iowa that Israelis live a life pretty much like Americans did post 9/11. He said, remember for a moment how many of us, the young people don't remember this probably so well, but those of us as adults remember what we felt like on the day after September 11th. That's how they, the Israelis, feel almost every day. That's what they feel like because of what they're dealing with.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, marketing campaign lines. Always, okay. Yeah. Well, I will be quiet. And
lastly, just a really nice pic from Seattle Bay. There was a demonstration against a big rig, a Shell oil rig, that is going to dig for some oil. And these people took hundreds and hundreds of canoes and kayaks to demonstrate against this oil rig and against the impact of fossil fuel consumption on climate change.
Yeah.
And these pictures went really viral. It's really nice.
Wow. I love the passion of Greenpeace and environment supporters. More power to them. I wish somebody would listen. Don't smile at me like that. Yeah. There's already going, Ami Kaufman, thank you, locked in studio with us as always as we move along. And still in the region because it gives us so much news. An Egyptian court sought the death penalty for former President Mohamed Morsi and more than 100 other members of the Muslim Brotherhood in connection with a mass jailbreak in 2011. The United States is deeply concerned, we're quoting President Obama now, about that Egyptian court decision, and this criticism followed condemnation from Amnesty International and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The ruling against Morsi is not the final and will not be made final until June 2nd. Still, it is the symbolism of it that most likely will rattle feathers in Egypt. Let's take a look at the following report about that death penalty handed down to Morsi and break it down from there.
Are these Mohamed Morsi's last days? A final ruling on June 2nd will provide the answer. Meanwhile, one day after Egypt delivered a hand-down death sentence to the former president and 100 other defendants, one of the central figures sentenced to die has spoken out against the ruling. Senior Muslim cleric Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi.
These rulings have no value and cannot be implemented because they are against the rule of God, against the people's law. No one will accept it.
Al-Qaradawi, a spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, is currently based in Qatar. Shortly after sentencing was handed down, the U.S. said it was deeply concerned and that the trial is inconsistent with Egypt's international obligations and the rule of law. Conversely, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the Egyptian ruling sees the country revert back to primitive times.
Unfortunately, the West has not taken a stand against Sisi. While the West is against the death penalty, they are just watching it continue in Egypt. They don't do anything about it.
But one statement of condemnation was particularly poignant, coming from Amnesty International. It was less than 2 months ago that Amnesty warned against a rise in mass executions in Egypt.
It's a very worrying development in 2014 that there has been this increase in death sentences. We would hope that it wouldn't be repeated, although we obviously have very significant concerns about the situation in Egypt because of the mass death sentences.
The ruling can still be appealed. Meanwhile, the former Egyptian president awaits the final sentence, which could very well change the fate of Egypt in the process.
Joined in studio by I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Ali, good morning to you. As both Ami and I were pardoning you throughout the report, Most likely this death sentence will not be carried out, correct?
It won't be carried out, but it is a message sent by President Sisi that when it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood and when it comes to an opposition that might endanger the power and the rule of the current regime in Egypt, no tools is a red line, and every tool is legitimate in the fight against the Muslim Brotherhood and against the Islamic opposition. Yeah, this concept of mass trial, it is amazing. Yes, Saturday it was 100. And a couple of weeks before it was
500
and 500, and this is to show that the military regime in Egypt, and I'm sorry to define the regime in place in Egypt as a military regime, as a regime that is very much determined to find any kind of opposition. And for the moment, we are hearing that also secular opposition elements and leaders are also thrown in jail. None of them was sentenced to death, but yes, sentenced for 15 and 20 years of jail. And this showed that it doesn't go only against the Muslim Brotherhood. It goes against any kind of opposition that might challenge Mr. Sisi.
But when it comes to Mr. Sisi, he is dealing. I saw this bit of piece about the report about Morsi. But then over the weekend, there were, I think, 2 judges that were killed in the Sinai. Or there was some attack in the Sinai. Is the Muslim Brotherhood, even though I'm assuming they know that Morsi is not going to react, how will they react to these rulings? What are they trying to do, and is this not something that's going to, make them charge even further?
The Muslim Brotherhood succeeded to got to power 3 years ago when they succeeded to dominate and to control their military wing, the Jama'ah Islamiyah, that split in the 80s from the Muslim Brotherhood and formed an armed wing that carried out terror attacks against tourists. We all remember the famous terror attack in Luxor and Aswan against the international tourists. And recently, because of this very tough hand led by President Sisi against the Muslim Brotherhood, we are seeing elements within the Muslim Brotherhood saying that the peaceful attitude vis-a-vis the regime is not enough, is not efficient, and we should use other methods. This is why it was not by accident that they targeted bus carrying judges at the day of the trial that sentenced Morsi to death, which means that we are seeing Egypt going through a chaos. We are seeing Egypt in danger to fall into an anarchy that is the case of Yemen and Syria. And
Egypt going bust that way. But Sisi seems to be consolidating everything inwards in a very strong way.
It is consolidating on one hand. On the other hand, because of his policy, we are seeing more and more Egyptians expressing some understanding to the acts carried out by the Muslim Brotherhood or groups identified with the Muslim Brotherhood. For the moment, they are making a difference between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic State in Sinai and elsewhere that are carrying a terror attack and endangering the whole stability of Egypt. But even the media that are close from the regime could not express support for the trial of last Saturday. When we understand that they are sentencing also leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood that were not in Egypt before the uprising of 2011, like Youssef Qaradawi, who is all the time in Qatar, when they are sentencing Hamas leaders arrested in Israeli jails. This is amazing, and this shows that.
And not only that, quickly in the time that we have, when the American president says that he's very concerned, I'm not quoting him, exactly, but concerned by these death sentences, that basically spells, to the Arab people, to the citizens of Egypt, that there will be no international intervention when it comes to, the breakdown of democracy in the country, doesn't it?
It sent a message that democracy, the democracy for the Arab people is something that you should look for it maybe in the West, not in Egypt and not in Arab states. But Yael, for the moment, we are seeing the Muslim Brotherhood is still very restrained in their reaction. But the moment that the Muhammad Badi or even Morsi or other leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood will call for a military uprising, I think that we will see Egypt like we never saw it before.
Something to look forward to. Ali Walker, thank you for being with us this morning. The changing role of the political cartoonist when we get back, from an impartial observer to a free speech advocate, is going to be fascinating. Stay with us. First, the news. Good morning. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place to be on this May 18th. I know the date, Ami.
You're finally by yourself.
Knock it down, and one day you will find your bow tie down again. Okay. It is I-24 News, May 18th, 2015. It's the place to be because, yes, this next one is quite special. There's hardly an English speaker in Israel who isn't familiar with Dry Bones, the Jerusalem Post political cartoon strip that has been published daily since 1973. It's almost my age. There you go. And has also often been reprinted in the likes of the New York Times, Forbes, and Time magazine. Dry Bones is the love child of Yaakov Kirschen, who doesn't only want to make his readers laugh, but also think and act. However, for these goals to be achieved, Kirschen believes that the position of the cartoonist himself must change from a so-called impartial observer who hides his personal biases to an informed and informing journalist and active advocate of freedom, not only freedom of speech. We are very happy to be joined in studio by Dry Bones cartoonist, maker, father, and the founder of the Dry Bones Academy of Cartoon Advocacy, Yaakov Dry Bones Kirschen.
Hey there.
Good morning. I thought after such an introduction, Yaakov, first of all, I want to...
Am I allowed to argue with anyone?
Yes, argue.
No, we'll leave that for later.
I can sense the New Yorker on you.
That's because I have no accent.
You see? There you go. Now, Yaakov, I want to start, though, with your illustrious career, because you've been around for a long time. Dry Bones is known by each and every...
I used to be younger.
Didn't we all? Didn't we all? This will be a kvetching session. But you began your career in Mad Magazine, which I find amazing.
Well, actually, it wasn't Mad Magazine. It was the guys who had started Mad Magazine, and then they decided that they wanted to have more control, so the owners of Mad Magazine fired them. And they went off to start a competitive magazine, and I went with them.
With them.
I've always aligned with the underdog, which has turned out to be a big mistake.
What was the name of that magazine? The other one? The new one? The After Mad?
They started something called Cracked.
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 I used to read Cracked. Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows your age. Okay, Cracked, and then Cracked turned into Mad Magazine. But over the course, we're going to fast this forward because I think, cartoonists have been in the...
I got to Playboy.
Okay, drop everything else. Really?
Yes.
And what did you do at Playboy?
I did non-girly cartoons for Playboy.
What are non-girly cartoons?
Non-girly cartoons.
Yeah, what are those?
Men.
Men, exactly.
No.
Yeah, non-girly is
woman.
not
Well, I don't
girlish,
know
or...
if it was girly or not. I remember one cartoon I did, which was a grumpy guy with a beard in bed, and then a woman who had just gotten out of the bed saying to him, "It is not for nothing that you are called terrible, Ivan." So that might have been in any case.
Okay. Yes, remember, note to self, use at home. Yes. That said, let's talk about these, before we touch on your initiative, and that's the Dry Bones Academy of Cartoon Advocacy. It has been a bad year for cartoonists in many ways. And, we all remember the horrible Charlie Hebdo massacre that happened several months ago. But I think it put cartoons, and especially cartoons in the Middle East or about the Middle East, in the news. What would be your take about, let's say cartoons, especially let's start with the region that we live in, where everybody is so sensitive, but we cannot give up on, satire and humor. What are we doing wrong when it comes to cartoons?
Okay, what we're doing wrong is we are in a cartoon war. Civilization is in a cartoon war. And there are two parts to that. That is the part that is anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Christian, okay? these cartoonists are doing cartoons that attack us. Now, our cartoonists, Western cartoonists, whether they are Israeli or American or British, we are trained to be self-critical. So what does an Israeli cartoonist or an English cartoonist or an American cartoonist do? What he does is to criticize, do self-criticism. So an Israeli cartoonist writes about everything that's wrong in Israel.
Right.
A cartoonist in Texas writes about everything that's wrong in Texas. So we are in a war in which the other side attacks us and our side attacks us. This is stupid.
What should we do?
What we need to do is we need to recognize that there is no such thing as journalistic impartiality.
Amen.
Okay, so...
Because it's against human nature, because people have opinions.
No reporter is impartial. If they are working for the New York Times, if they are working for the BBC, they are working for organizations that are paying them to communicate messages.
And a certain agenda or a certain ideology.
Right. So those of us who look for impartiality are being stupid, right? And so we complain and we say, hey, that's not fair. Well, it's not that it's not fair, it's part of their agenda. And therefore, we need to develop our cartoonists to understand that our cartoonists have to have an agenda. Our cartoonists are warriors in a war. If we send a soldier down to fight in Gaza, we don't want him to say, gee, you know, there are some bad things happening in Sderot. I think I'll shoot a rocket at Sderot. That's not his job. His job now is to fight on our behalf. This is a new reality for cartoonists. It used to be that a cartoonist appeared in a newspaper. So therefore, the newspaper would be delivered by a newspaper truck. People would read the news and see what the cartoonist had to say about it.
Right.
But what's happening now is people go online, they look up Israel, they look up Italy, they look up the Pope, whatever they do, and they see individual items. The cartoon has been freed from the newspaper, and distribution is based on the reader. A reader who sees that cartoon and says, gee, that should get out, shares and likes.
The user, so to speak. Rather, you know, we've become users rather than readers, and it does affect your profession. I want to touch specifically, though, about your cartoons and make the point that you're making through them. And I'd love to start with today's Jerusalem Post cartoon, in which you're portraying, this is Abbas and the Pope, the meeting over the weekend. And we're taking a look at this cartoon right now.
Angel of Peace.
Angel of Peace. The Pope is willing to give Jerusalem to the Muslims in hopes of keeping Rome for a little while longer. Okay. Break it down for me.
Okay. The new function of cartoons today, advocacy cartoons, is not just to comment on something, it is also to inform, because the average consumer of news is not necessarily going to know that the Pope made this statement.
True, but that said, you know...
So therefore, the cartoon must communicate the news item and comment on it.
And comment, but you are also communicating in this specific cartoon your interpretation of that bit of news. People would argue from the other side.
Of course, because my cartoon, like any cartoonist, is advocating something.
Because
I have an agenda.
Part of the Jerusalem Post, for example.
No, this is not done as part of the Jerusalem Post. In fact, this particular cartoon didn't appear in the Jerusalem Post.
No, not the Jerusalem Post, but let's say part of an Israeli newspaper, part of an Israeli agenda.
No, it is my personal agenda. I am a Zionist. I look at the world in a certain way, and I do not hide that. The question is one of honesty. Someone who is a reporter for the New York Times or for CBS or for the BBC is posing as if they don't have an agenda. Anyone who's reading Dry Bones knows I have an agenda. My agenda is I support the existence of the Jewish state. I support the idea of Jews coming to live in the Jewish state. I oppose the ignoring of the Holocaust of Christians, whether it's in North Africa and Nigeria or whether it's in Syria. Those are the things that I am for. And when I do a cartoon, I am communicating a piece of news that should be known and may not be known, and giving a comment on it.
Wouldn't people say, and I'm sorry in the short time that we have, though, that that the other side or our side, let me rephrase this: are there no red lines? Are there red lines that should not be crossed in cartoons?
I think that a cartoon that offends people is a bad cartoon.
The what? Sorry.
A cartoon that offends someone is a bad cartoon. Yeah. And cartoonists are used to saying, well, I got them. I stuck it to them. That's not what a cartoon should be. A cartoon should use humor and intelligence to slide under people's defense mechanism. My goal is to reach my enemy. I want the people who disagree with me to laugh, and in that moment, they are agreeing with me.
Listen, it's a fabulous agenda, Yaakov Dryborn-Skirchen. I wanted to quickly say that it is the Academy, the founder of the Dry Bones Academy of Cartoon Advocacy, who are also advocating for cartoons and whatnot to be also part of journalism schools, which I think is a fabulous idea. And you are staying with us in studio, as I see you already painting the Pope. Maybe you can paint me, and I will not tell the Pope. As we move along to Ami Kaufman with the web review, the spiral viral that is.
Spiral
Try
viral.
And beat this.
Well, I'm not going to beat that. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen.
Yes.
But maybe Vladimir Putin can do it. Vladimir Putin, as we know, is always putting up, macho pictures of himself doing various things, and now he's doing. He played some hockey games. He plays hockey very well, and we have a video of him scoring about a few goals.
Putin, hockey, maybe without a shirt. Let's take a look.
Yeah, here
oh
it
no,
is.
with a shirt. Damn. Oh my word! How very American of him. Wow.
I think it's more Canadian of him.
That's true. That's true. Thank you. That's true. Shows you where I stand. And everybody's like, let the man play alone. But let him run to the goal again. No.
Didn't we see him hunting tigers at some point?
Exactly. Hunting tigers.
There he goes. There's his scores. And another one. And another one. He scores.
And everybody, in the locker room, going, "Phew, we let him score. Thank God." Yes, he was hunting tigers, definitely.
He scored 8 goals in this game.
And
he scored 8 goals.
That hockey guardsman there, I don't know what you call the guys who guard the cage. He will live to play another day.
Amen. Yes.
And another politician who's doing weird things in the sports arena. This is Mitt Romney, who took to the ring and fought Evander Holyfield in a charity bout. That raised $1 million for an organization called Charity Vision that helps people suffering from
I'm sorry, I can't close my mouth.
Let's watch the video of this one.
Please, Mitt Romney really losing it.
Try and beat up the body.
Oh, that's Evander Holyfield down.
Goes Holyfield.
That
was a slip.
That was a slip. I'm sorry, that's a slip. I'm doing you. That's Mitt Romney without a shirt. I don't know if America was ready for that. That's very Putinesque of him. I'm a guess. Run.
Throws in the towel.
Yeah.
That's it.
That was it?
As you can see, the Romney team threw in the towel, and Evander Holyfield won that bout.
I have to say, but this is why Americans...
That was shocking. That was absolutely shocking.
I want to say, though, that I really think that Israeli politics should take that route. Really? In a ring, without shirts.
Without shirts. I don't know if I can't think of anyone I want to see Israeli politics.
Who knows?
But here we are, Israeli politicians. On Facebook, as we know, Dani Danon, a Likudnik backbencher, who was appointed the Israeli Minister of Science, Technology, and Space.
And Space.
He is the Minister of Space. Now, social media is really going crazy over this. There's a Facebook page. There's a Facebook page that's calling him the Minister of Space, and they're putting all these pictures up of him doing. Here he is as Darth Vader, with Bibi next to him as the other evil guy in the Star Wars. Look at the Magen David spaceships.
Yaakov, would you say that this educates?
The Magen David, and that's him as
Minister
David
of
Bowie.
Space doesn't sound. It sounds sort of empty, doesn't it? I mean,
I know. I mean, I have to say this, and I know this is unfair, but he came out with a status after he was named Minister of Space, saying, Danny Danon, saying that he's going to utilize all the social agenda for the people of Israel. And I'm wondering, what is he going to do? Send all the poor people to space?
Yeah.
You know, what's going to be the next phase?
Send them boldly where no man has gone before.
Where no man has ever gone before. Yes, and really quickly, one last one.
Sad news. FAO Schwartz on 5th Avenue is closing down. They just can't afford the rent anymore. There's that famous picture.
And we cannot afford their toys.
That famous picture from Big where Tom Hanks playing on the piano. I've done that myself at FAO Schwartz.
I know, me too. I sucked. But
played on a toy piano?
No, you stomp on it with your feet.
With your feet, it's
phenomenal.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's a huge
but no more, folks, because FA Schwartz is closing its doors.
I remember them from the old days where they had giant teddy bears.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they cost $11,000.
$11,000. Money we don't have, and now we don't have where to spend it. That said, that's all for this segment. Stay with us when you get back. It is Messi's time. Yes, the Barca wins something. We'll tell you all about it. First, though, the news. Good morning, I-24 News, May 18th, 2015. The time to wake up Shai Ringen on this Monday.
Yeah.
Because you seem like this is the last place you want to be in.
Okay.
That is Shai Ringen of the Tube magazine, the Tube correspondent, the man you want to meet with the highest energy level ever. Shai, I'm waiting for the day you're going to sit in the studio and like take your shirt off and go, wow. Okay. What do you have for me this morning?
Okay, let's talk about flights.
Let's.
You know when you're in an airplane and the flight attendants tell you to shut your computer off because it's going to interfere with the plane? Well, apparently it may do that.
I thought they were messing with us.
Yeah, they kind of messing with us and kind of not. There's this new thing called Wi-Fi in flights, and that is now being a real security flaw because a man called Chris Roberts was been taken off a plane.
Who looks like ZZ Top.
Yeah.
Okay.
After this guy tweeted that he's going to hack into the airplane. Into the in-flight entertainment system. And after he tweeted that, he was escorted off the plane and got into an FBI investigation. He found himself in a room with an FBI agent, and he told the FBI agent that he already did that. He already hacked into the in-flight entertainment system. Not only that, after doing the in-flight entertainment system, he got into the thrust manager of the plane, and he steered the plane he steered the plane
just a little bit to the right.
For a couple of seconds, he says, but he managed to do that.
Was he bluffing, or did that really happen? Or
now
is there a way of checking it?
Yeah, that is now a big controversial because we still don't know if he's bluffing.
I'm looking at this man, and I'm thinking, come on.
This guy has been dedicating his career to talk about and research security in planes, and he's been talking about it for more than 10 years. He's been lecturing about it. He works at a security firm, which means that his job is to find these flaws, but apparently while finding these flaws, he actually
created one.
Yeah, and he the problem is that if it's true, if it did happen, it did happen in a flight, he really, risked everyone's life.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. Not just risking everyone's life. It's not, it's not kind of like I'm getting on a flight to New York, but actually I feel like going to Miami.
Yeah. No, but we're talking about he did it with a Wi-Fi. Which means that there's now a lot of flights that have Wi-Fi in them.
And I think it just drives the point home that Wi-Fi, not necessary in flights, but they should bring back smoking.
Yeah. But he says that
Shai, my jokes just fly over your head.
I'm sorry.
Or maybe I'm not that funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so he's basically the psycho new Unabomber, looking the part. What else?
Okay, let's talk about a very nice Israeli startup called Genie. I know you're excited about that product.
I am very
because
much.
it looks great. We have a video.
We do. Let's have a look.
With the press of a button on your phone, the Genie becomes your personal chef, mixing, shaking, and baking a healthy meal in just 30 seconds. Developed by Israeli entrepreneurs at White Innovation, the device uses tiny pods to create meals, similar to those that contain coffee for espresso machines. White Innovation CEO, Ayelet Carasso.
The dish can be anything. It can be a meal, like chicken with rice, or like couscous with vegetable, or an amazing ramen, or even a chocolate souffle, or any other dessert that you want. And it's healthy because we're using only natural ingredients. We're not using any preservative or anything that people add to their meals.
The all-natural ingredients in the pods are freeze-dried and have a shelf life of 1 to 2 years. Israeli chefs have already begun producing new recipes for Genie's pods and plan to add more for those with diets that are sugar-free or gluten-free.
Okay, run this by me. Hold on. I have issues with this. She's a gorgeous blonde chick, okay? And she's pushing the idea of small meals, which obviously you have to eat very little meals in order to look like that. But you seem perplexed. I don't get it. It's freeze-dried.
Yeah, they are not saying what's the real technology behind it.
Yeah, what is the technology?
But it looks like something out of a sci-fi movie because you are putting a little box inside that pod, and it produced a meal, a hot meal, in 30 seconds to 1 minute. And they say they have recipes for couscous and ramen.
I saw the plates.
Yeah.
I don't get it because the plates look like something out of a restaurant.
No, something out of the restaurant. You'll have to,
to organize it. It's not like I go and boom, it comes.
But you are taking the little box inside the pod, and when you're taking it out, you'll have the meal inside the box, and then you can put it on your plate.
On your plate. But where is it done? In a microwave? In a
They are not disclosing what's the technology. They are saying.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, because they say that this is going to revolutionize the kitchen. They are saying what's inside the pods, inside the boxes.
What the meal is.
Yeah, what the meal is.
They just don't say what it's made of.
They have to disclose the ingredients of the food.
I know, but I still don't get it. Like, and the pod, there's a little machine that they send with it, and you like put the thingy in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very mysterious.
No, it's incredibly mysterious.
We're going to have them in the studio, and this Thursday, and we're going to talk everything about what's in that box. And
it's kind of like that joke about you don't want to know two things and how they make two things: Polish sausage and morning television. You know, that's by the way the line.
Yeah.
So that looks like one of them. But
yeah, but they are saying that they gave the meals to chefs around Israel, and the chefs said that these are eatable.
They're edible. Okay.
Edible. So at least they're edible.
At least they're edible. Whatever they're made of, they're made. Yeah, it's like Soylent Green. It's made of people. Okay. Yes. One more thing.
One more. Okay. Let's talk about another Israeli interesting project called Free. They have a very interesting Kickstarter, and it's making a lot of buzz. We have a video.
We have a video. Let's take a look.
This is Free, and it takes you way beyond the screen. With Free, you can write or draw on nearly any surface, and your words or pictures will appear on your screen instantly. Free brings us back to a more direct interaction with the world around us, in part by freeing us to use one of our most personal skills, handwriting. Free's sophisticated optical tracking engine can trace anyone's handwriting on nearly any surface to an incredible level of accuracy. There has never been anything like it. It's got a mini touch display for notifications, lets you reply instantly, and even doubles as a headset to take phone calls.
Hi, Michael.
Write yourself a note the second you think of it. Jot down a phone number or doodle your next brainchild. Your thoughts and ideas are captured instantly on your device.
I want to say, because you intro this is an Israeli startup, but if you say everything with a British accent, it sounds incredibly intellectual.
Yeah,
okay.
and it looks magical.
I've no idea what it does, but it's free.
It's a stylus. Israel.
Okay. What the heck's a stylus?
It's that pen that you can draw on iPads and touch screens. And there are two big Israeli startups that already has a stylus technology.
Right.
One of them was bought by Microsoft last month, and they are new, free. It's a new product, and they say you can write on every surface. We tried the prototype,
right,
and it looks nice, but trying to bring back the stylus, I felt like I have palm free.
It's kind of so early 90s, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would be the take of Shai Ringel, a young man, on things we old people remember. But it's Shai, thank you so much. Locked in studio, we will embarrass you a bit more. Okay. Moving on to sports, and Yoav Borovich, who's been sitting here patiently, looking very important.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, darling?
I'm great.
Okay, there's exciting football news, right?
Exciting football and basketball news. Let's start with the football.
Amen.
Last night, Barcelona FC Football Club, after losing, probably the team with the most fans in the world, with Manchester United and Real Madrid, now moving to Real Madrid because Barca was able to defeat during the season Real Madrid and to win the championship. After losing it last year, and we're talking about Real Madrid not winning the championship for 4 years now, maybe the most expensive team in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo just won championship in 6 years. We're talking the great Ronaldo,
right,
and ending up play a little bit like a loser because nobody expected that he'll win only one championship in 6 years. So when Ronaldo loses, we know who wins. Leo Messi, of course.
God, it's kind of like the American elections. Can we change the players? Does it have to be Clinton and Bush all the time?
And it's been both of them like twins, but now it's not already. They're not together. Messi separated himself from Ronaldo. He scored the winning goal.
Who's older?
Ronaldo is older, but very close. I think less than 1 or 2 years apart.
Dude, it's that year that makes the difference.
It is, So Messi scoring the goal, Barca winning the championship, just great news for their fans, and it's really a big accomplishment because they had a difficult season. They brought in Luis Suarez. They had all those ego issues with Neymar, Suarez, and Messi, those three megastars playing on top. People thought, how would they coexist? Every one of them has this big ego, this big talent, but they're really, they're together and they like each other. One from Uruguay, one from Argentina, and one from Brazil. It's a South American coexisting in Spain.
Okay, moving along.
Moving along to the biggest story in American sports and basketball basketball news. It's David Blatt, the Israeli-American coach who just sat in this studio a few months ago, talking about him winning the EuroLeague with Maccabi Tel Aviv.
We rock!
After that, he moved to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, he got to Cleveland. He signed with a team that was supposed to be a young team, not a very talented team. But what happened 2 weeks after they signed David Blatt is they signed LeBron James. LeBron James is the biggest thing in basketball.
Even I know who he is.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you know him,
then
he's good.
And I think we have David saying something, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a listen.
People are going to say, and rightfully so, they won 3 out of 4 games, and that's the reality. But 3 out of 4 of those games, we were not the same team that we are right now. We played obviously with different units in the first 2 games, which were blowouts one way or the other. And in the third game, Braun didn't play. And in the fourth game in Atlanta, we played with the full squad, more or less, if I'm not mistaken, just at the end of a very, very tough stretch. But the Atlanta Hawks are in the Eastern Conference Finals.
David Blatt is addressing their matchup against Atlanta Hawks. Now, what happened when they played the Chicago Bulls is they had a very big feud, a dramatic feud between David Blatt and his star player LeBron James.
Right.
Because they had a last-second shot. David Blatt wanted LeBron to pass the ball to another player. LeBron said, no, no, no. Another player is going to pass it to me. I'm going to shoot it. And that's what happened. He shot it. He made it. Cleveland since won all their games. David Blatt looks like, although he won, He looks a bit like a loser because he also got into like a public feud with LeBron James. But still, the fact that Cleveland won and they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals is a big achievement. And now everybody's looking at both of them playing against Atlanta. If they beat Atlanta, they make it to the NBA Finals. If they win the NBA, so it's going to be the greatest accomplishment ever for a rookie coach coming from all the way from Israel, coaching small teams here just a few years ago, and then going to the biggest stage in the world and making it just unbelievable story.
Unbelievable. And we should mention he is a Jew.
Among other things.
I'm trying to make Shai Ringle here laugh because it's Monday.
But LeBron James isn't.
Yes. Okay, all the time we had this morning, sadly, folks, because it was getting so exciting. Do not forget to tune in tomorrow morning for another edition of I-24 News Morning Edition. Of course, check us out on Facebook and Twitter and all those social networks. And we leave you with some very thoughtful cartoons, as you saw throughout this show. Once again, I-24 News Morning Edition. Check us out tomorrow morning, and have a wonderful day.